Right, and we now want to get into our discussion that we promised you earlier on today. We're talking about conservation and why this is so important. I think this was probably drawn to the minds of Kenyans when we saw that entire herd of elephants that were killed earlier on this year. And of course, all of this for their ivory. Today we're speaking with Paula Kahumbu, who's in the forefront conservation of wildlife in the country, and I think conservation in general. Thank you so much for making the time to be with us. Let's talk about those numbers. First of all, it's not 30,000 in Kenya, it's 30,000 across the continent.
That's right. Last year, poachers gunned down 30,000 elephants across Africa. 30,000. That's the total number of elephants in all of Kenya. That's how serious it is.
Okay. Then let's talk about that then. Obviously, we know it's about the ivory. Why is this on the rise? Why would we have 30,000 killed? 384, like you said, in the country. What's going on? Is it our laws that are not as strong as they should be? Is there a demand for them that's increasing in the East, as we know it?
Yvonne, it all comes from demand, absolutely. The demand for ivory in the Far East, especially China, Thailand, and other countries, even the United States, has caused the price of ivory to rise astronomically in the last few years. And this has happened because CITES, the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species, made a decision in 2002 to allow a sale of ivory to China. That sale took place in 2009. What we saw in Kenya was a monumental rise in poaching immediately after that sale. At that time, conservation organizations and Kenya fought very, very courageously to prevent this sale from taking place, because we knew that China has such an enormous demand. The Chinese people treasure ivory as an item that demonstrates your wealth and prestige. And because of rising affluence in China, so many people can afford it, even if it's a tiny piece of ivory. Okay. But you've got a population of over 1 billion people who want that little piece of ivory. If everyone in China got the piece of ivory they wanted, African elephants would be wiped out in a year.
Let's talk about that CITES convention and the decision to reverse that and now allow this. Why would they do that?
Well, there was a huge amount of pressure and lobbying from Southern Africa, Botswana, Namibia, South Africa, and Zimbabwe in particular. They lobbied very effectively. What they said is, look, our elephants are safe, which is true. They were not seeing a poaching surge. They have a lot of ivory that is either seized or from culling, because they had been culling the elephants. So they had these huge stocks of ivory. And our argument was, if you release that ivory into the market, you will trigger a demand that you will not be able to control. Exactly. You'll trigger a demand that will affect the rest of Africa. And it's irresponsible for 4 countries to take that responsibility. What we said is, you need the money. We know you need the money. Why couldn't they have sold that ivory in a way that it doesn't actually enter into the markets? They could have done something like what Kenya did in 1989, when elephants were literally driving down to extinction. Kenya burned her ivory, and in exchange we got an enormous amount of support, international support, to enable us to protect our elephants, and elephants began to rise again. But Southern Africa are very different from the rest of Africa in that they believe that this ivory should be allowed to be traded. And economists are now saying, you know, that's being ridiculous. Elephants are not minerals. Elephants are not trees.
That's right, yes.
They live for 65 years. They are incredibly emotional, compassionate animals. You can't just harvest them the way that, or farm them the way we farm cattle. If you put ivory onto the markets, the impact on elephant herds is so dramatic because of the poaching. So I'll give you an example. Up in northern Kenya, a female named Bonsai was shot dead a few weeks ago. Bonsai was 25 years old. She was a matriarch. So a matriarch is the female in charge of the entire family. And her family was over 20 individuals. Now, Bonsai was too young to be a matriarch. Matriarchs normally are in their 30s and 40s. These are mature, experienced females who know how to lead their families. Bonsai was leading a family that was already disrupted because her mother was killed 2.5 years ago. When Bonsai was shot, the whole family just disintegrated. The same thing happened with Kumquat in Amboseli, and I can name you tens of matriarchs that have been gunned down by these poachers. What we now have are families without leaders. These are like juvenile delinquents. They're running around, they don't know how to protect themselves. They suffer severely in the drought. In fact, we lost thousands during the last drought as a result of these leaderless families not knowing how to protect their individuals. But in addition, they get themselves into trouble with communities. So we also hear about rising human-elephant conflict, because to these animals, the fastest, quickest meal is go and raid a shamba.
Because they don't know how to navigate within their environment as a result of losing their leader.
And they don't even know they're in danger. The leaders know where danger is.
Right.
These guys don't even know they're in danger, so they go off, they raid shambas, the next thing you know, they're full of spears and poison arrows. And it's devastating what's happening in this country.
When we talk about some of those numbers, and obviously, where is the government in all of this? The greatest thing we're talking about is legislation. We have the wildlife bill. I'll tell you what angered a lot of Kenyans. The Chinese man was found with the tusks and he was fined 30,000 shillings. It wasn't even the going rate of the tusks that he was found with. He would obviously have made so much more money over that. Let's talk about the government's role in this, in legislation to be particular.
Okay, thank you for that. You know, the current legislation isn't strong enough, we know that. But what our magistrates are doing is abominable. They are actually responsible for the killing that is going on, because they are issuing fines of 20,000, 30,000, sometimes even community service. Go and chop the grass at the chief's office for people who are killing elephants and selling ivory. This is threatening our security, it's threatening our job security, it's threatening our economy. And these magistrates, I've actually heard them say things like, this is a petty offense. Our jails are full, we don't want to send people to jail. The law allows them to send people to jail up to 3 years for each offense. And if you're caught with ivory, and if you're inside a national park and you've got a gun, there are multiple offenses you could be charged with. And you could also be charged with economic crimes. You could be charged with organized crimes, or even terrorism crimes, which carry a maximum of 15 years. What's happening right now is that magistrates are, I think, being woken up to their responsibility. And the prosecutors are also waking up to their responsibility. So what's happening from the DPP's office is we now have prosecutors who are specializing on wildlife crimes. So this is fabulous. That means you now have a proper prosecution taking place in court, arguing to a magistrate, and the magistrate can now make a ruling based on much better information. And Kenya Wildlife Service is central to this. So I'm really pleased to have found out yesterday that the first case happened 2 weeks ago, where the Kenya Wildlife Service prosecuted a case in Naivasha. 3 men were caught with 2 gigantic tusks weighing 42 kilos. That's about 5 million shillings worth of ivory. They were found guilty. They probably thought they would be fined. They've gone to jail for 2 years each. That's the first case, and so I really congratulate that magistrate.
Okay, so strides being made in the right direction, and I think awareness also on the part of government officials, the prosecutors knowing which charges to confer on those who are found with ivory. Right. Let's talk about the initiative then, Hands Off Our Elephants. This is the background that we've laid there, and so let's talk about that and what you hope to achieve with that.
Well, Hands Off Our Elephants is really recognizes that this is a crisis. Kenya faces really an emergency situation for our elephants and our rhinos and many other species. Elephants really are the animal that we can all connect with. The initiative says this is not just a conservation problem, which traditionally only conservationists have handled, and we've always left it to KWS, and we've criticized them for failing. Look, these are criminal cartels running around our country with guns, shooting down our animals and destroying our economy, threatening our tourists. That's a terrorism crime. We're saying this should not be left to KWS alone. Hands Off Our Elephants is a partnership. It gets government involved at the highest level, from the Chief Justice, the DPP, the Inspector General, the head of NIS, the First Lady herself. She sees the value of this, right? So it's really elevating the seriousness of this problem to the highest government level, involving the cabinet secretaries from Foreign Affairs, Tourism, and Environment. In addition, we're partnering with corporates. We're saying the Kenyan economy is going to suffer if we lose these elephants. Corporates have a huge amount to contribute, and they also have a huge responsibility. So it's amazing that Kenya Airways were the first ones to come on board and say, you know what, we don't want to be carrying ivory across this country. So Kenya Airways have come in and said, we're going to do whatever it takes to make sure no passenger ever gets onto a Kenya Airways aircraft with ivory thinking that they're going to get away with it. We've also been talking now to the ports authorities, because a lot of our ivory is going through Mombasa port and also our land ports. And then, of course, there is the Kenya Wildlife Service, critical, obviously, because they're the ones on the ground. They're the people who we send out there to come face to face with poachers. And it's horrendous when we hear cases like a week ago where we lost 2 men who were murdered in cold blood by these poachers. This is a war. It's something that really requires that level of engagement. And civil society has always played a role, but now what we're doing is elevating or giving civil society a platform to partner with government and the corporate sector to actually make the difference that needs to be taken. And we've done this because we realized that after, you know, maybe a decade of trying to raise attention, it was not working.
All right.
We need a new audience, we need new players, we need new force to get this.
All right, some new impetus and a new way of doing things. The poachers, as I understand, are highly sophisticated. I mean, for them, this is a multi-billion shilling, if not dollar industry for them. Is the KWS matching up to that? Do we need to support them, a lot more? Because we understand the poachers come into our parks with the most sophisticated of equipment. And, the KWS rangers are no match for the poachers.
Yvonne, it's interesting. Look, there is money to be made, right? What's happening is almost everybody is getting involved in this now, from rich kids to police officers, government officials, and poachers of all types. I got a call from Savo yesterday that there is, a frenzy going on. We are not talking about poachers wearing camo with night sights and all this stuff. We're talking about men with bows and arrows and poison. I don't call that sophisticated. That is traditional. They're using spears with poison. They're using it. These
are locals, we presume?
Of course.
Who are getting into it now?
Absolutely. What is happening is, if you have a gun and all this equipment, you're easy. You're a target, right?
Yes.
So what they're doing is they're going the other way now, in Savo in particular. A lot of the Somali herders who were in that area have been chased out, and now the local guys are poaching. They're poaching in a way that is causing incredible pain and suffering to the elephants, and it's very traumatic for tourists to come around. They find an elephant with a spear in its body and an arrow in its head. The animals are suffering, and you can see the pain in their bodies. Just in the last few days, Kenya Wildlife Service and the David Sheldrick Trust have rescued, tens of these animals. I was told that if they weren't there, 50 elephants would have died in the last month. That's how serious it is. And then we do have the poachers who have stolen or acquired somehow night vision equipment, silencers on their guns. These are the guys who are especially going after our rhinos. And yes, in that case, KWS has to match them. And in some ways, I would say yes, KWS does match it. But what's lacking, what everyone knows is lacking, is the coordination across the agencies.
Right.
If you're going to go after poachers, it's no good just catching the guy with the spear or the gun.
That's right.
That guy will go to jail, and another chap will fill his place. What you need to do is catch a guy at the top who's organizing this, right?
Absolutely.
That requires intelligence. And so we need a coordinated effort from the National Intelligence Service, the police, and KWS. These little turf wars that they're having are so destructive. They need to realize that in order for us to make the monumental shift that's required and that can be made in Kenya, unlike many other African countries, these guys have to work together. And with Customs, KRA, and the Ports Authority. Those guys have to work at a very high level. And so Hands Off Our Elephants is actually calling on the President to create a national task force that comprises all these guys, plus the National Council on the Administration of Justice, so that they report directly to the President on something that is a national priority.
Okay, all right. And this is a national priority, and you're calling that. Why should we care? Why should we be involved in the Hands Off Our Elephants initiative? Why should this be a big deal? For many of us, we live in Nairobi, and I'll guarantee you there's many who, despite the fact that Nairobi is one of those unique cities in the world that has a national park right in the center, probably, aren't too concerned. Why is this a big deal?
It's, I grew up here, very close to the Nairobi National Park. I feel so privileged that I've grown up in a country that is so blessed with this incredible wildlife. Because we live here and we live with it, we tend to just think that's normal. So when you go overseas, you discover that the UK has lost virtually everything. They have a few deer and a few squirrels. Go to America,
Right.
what remains of their bison is tiny little herds that are very highly protected. Even if you go to China, they've only got 200 elephants left in China. You know how
Country
big
of a
China
billion
is.
people?
They've only got 200 elephants left. So we should protect it because we have it. And we can be the world's superpower in terms of nature tourism, especially this wilderness experience. But it's not just that. Recently, the First Lady asked children to write letters to the President, and I got to read many of those letters. 600 letters came in, and there's still more arriving all the time. And what children are saying is so powerful. They're saying, I don't want to get to my teenage years and not be able to see an elephant in the wild. You know, you owe it to us, you owe it to our generation. And I think it's really important that we listen to these voices of children. In 1973, it was children that marched on the streets of Nairobi. And that was what touched President Kenyatta. He put an order to secure one individual elephant, Ahmed, the biggest elephant in the world. He was declared a national treasure. That's the level of commitment the government needs to provide to secure this for future generations. Children protested again in 1989. They marched on the streets. Small kids, some of them 5, 6 years old. I would love to meet those guys now.
Today, yeah.
Those children persuaded President Moi to burn the ivory. You know, children have this power because they speak to us and hold us to account as adults, and we have to listen to them.
Okay. Besides the fact that it does net the country quite a bit of money.
Oh my goodness. Tourism, you know, tourism from wildlife generates about 120 billion shillings. A lot of Kenyans think that, what does that mean?
Yeah.
How do I,
Yes.
how do I,
we
you know,
relate
I haven't
to that?
seen it. It's not in my
Yes.
pocket, right?
Right.
That represents 4 times the Thika highway, right? 4 Thika highways, that's how much we stand to lose per year.
Okay.
Now, what does that mean in terms of us as individuals? Well, that money that is generated from tourism, that pays for the roads, that pays for the salaries of our members of parliament, that pays for schools, free education, free medical attention, and everything that we know and that we ask the government to give us. Tourism is contributing to that, so it does affect me directly. But in addition, just think about this. If we lost tourism, if we lost elephants, 1 in 4 people in the tourism industry would lose their jobs. 1 in 4. We have about 300,000 people employed directly in the tourism industry. Just imagine if we lost, 70 or 80,000 of those people, and just think of the cascade effect.
Yeah.
All of their families, their relatives,
their dependents,
and all the jobs that they create under them. That would actually cause a national crisis. It would cause instability in this country.
All right.
That's why we should care.
And yes, and that's important to just bring it down to our level. Before we go into some of the questions we're getting on Twitter, Arnold asks, is it just poaching or are there other factors like environmental degradation that, are posing
That's
challenges?
A great question.
Yes.
That's a great question. And I would say first, poachers, what they do is they target the matriarchs. So you kill the mother, the main mother.
That's because the tusks are big, right?
Right, because she's got the biggest tusks.
Yes.
But also, when a matriarch goes down, the family doesn't know what to do. And they stand around in confusion. They're easy to shoot as well.
Okay.
And what often happens is a matriarch goes down. Even if they kill only the matriarch, her young will all die. Because there's nobody to look after them, right? So her young will die. So for every female killed, 2 or 3 babies will also die within the next few days or weeks. It means that the family then becomes very unstable. With this increasing climate change and the impact of it, we're having droughts like 2009. Do you remember how severe it was? The number of elephants that died in Amboseli was phenomenal. It was far greater than anyone would have imagined. The same up in Samburu. So we're seeing much more severe droughts. So families that are disrupted cannot find water. Elephants are amazing because they've got such massive brains and they know the landscape. But it's the matriarch who carries generations of knowledge. So in severe situations which occur every few tens of years,
she knows what
she's the only one who knows where to go, right? She's the only one who knows where to take the family. So definitely climate change related environmental degradation is a big part of that. And what we're doing through lack of proper planning in this country is we're interfering with the movements of elephants. these animals need to move vast distances. And so there are two fantastic new initiatives to address it for two major populations. Down in Amboseli, there is actually a move to work with the local communities who own those vast tracts of land through which elephants migrate. They're partnering with conservationists, with the Kenya Wildlife Service, to open up corridors. The newest one is called Kitenden, and it was organized through the International Fund for Animal Welfare and the Kenya Wildlife Service and other partners. And there's another one up in Mount Kenya, because we know the animals, the elephants move across the Laikipia area and up Mount Kenya. I don't think Kenyans realize how important these animals are. Just think of what they do in terms of moving. They create pathways that other animals use. They also transport seeds, which they distribute, and so they're planting gardens along the way. And they're also moving nutrients around the ecosystem. These are really powerful ecosystem services that we've never captured the value of. And so the connection now of Lewa to Mount Kenya as part of a World Heritage Site actually restores an ancient migratory corridor, which we should be very proud of in Kenya. We've done this, but we need planning now, really at a national scale.
Right. Talking about the Hands Off Our Elephants initiative, you've talked about the corporate sector and how some, members of the corporate sector are coming in to partner. Talked about Kenya Airways, First Lady is involved. Paula Char is asking, so how can ordinary citizens be involved? What can I do? What can anyone watching do and say, oh, well, that's for Paula, that's for Kenya Airways, that's for the president, very good, what he's done. But what about me as an ordinary citizen? How can I be part of this?
The campaign is actually designed to enable anybody, anywhere, to get involved. And we really want Kenyans to see this not as I'm donating my time, or I'm doing this because you need it, but I'm doing this because I really care. I'm doing this because it gives me joy to save an animal that is one of the world's most magnificent species. So there are all kinds of things. We have young people, for example, doing things like Piramol, and another young man talked during the Bumbata festival. So getting young people to come out and provide education, going into schools, talking to children. We have people who are doing marches across cities all around the world, and this starts in October. We have the Hay Festival coming up, so what we want young people to do in particular is to not only come to create awareness and to support the cause, but also to bring their ideas. We're going to be running innovation camps for young people to come and actually sit down, listen to the problem, and help us solve it. You don't have to be a conservationist, because many of these solutions could come from the engineering world, they could come from the art world, they could come from the communication fields. We're actually inviting anybody, anywhere, to join us in whichever way possible. It could be through education, it could be through real activism, it could be through actions on the ground, helping us with fundraising, writing petitions, making presentations to their own members of parliament. When it comes to the wildlife bill, this is really important. Kenyans have to understand what the issues are and then speak to their members of parliament so that they make the right decisions when the bill comes up for discussion.
I like that you say it doesn't take a conservationist to come up with some of these solutions. It could be, from any field. It could be technological. And that brings me to another question we've got from George, who says Tanzania is considering using drones to protect their elephants. What are some of the options that Kenya has?
Well, Kenya actually is already using drones. I think drones may help. I think if I was a poacher, I'd be terrified if I knew there was this little spy plane up there watching me, because it can watch you day and night. I don't know if it can take you out. Maybe it can. Who knows? It's all very secretive. I think we have to also invest in the basics. People, because there is no technology that is going to replace the human brain. Kenya is extraordinary. We have people who know the land, who can read the signs, and who can gather intelligence. That is where we need to invest, because it is people who are killing elephants. It is people, and we need to understand their motivation. We need to change people's values, because I feel so sad when I see these young people getting shot dead because they're poaching, or sent to jail for extended periods of time. It's shameful for their families. And it must also, destroy your self-worth, going out and killing a magnificent animal like an elephant. So I think that we need to also look at the communities who live with these animals. They're not going to be flying drones, those guys.
That's right.
Those are the guys who we need to enlist as the biggest supporters in this fight. And it's not just because elephants are nice animals, it's because their future depends on these animals. And it's not just from tourism. In Wajir, elephants were decimated in the 70s and 80s. And after elephants disappeared, the land became very dry. We now know it's because elephants were bringing in the nutrients. Elephants were digging the water holes that people use for their cattle and their goats. Right. And elephants were also planting the seeds and created all that lush vegetation. They've lost an animal that was actually sustaining them.
It's a symbiotic relationship, mutually beneficial to both humans and wildlife. Let's talk about our relationship with countries in the Far East that are perpetuating poaching and of course the demand that's there. What would you like the government to do in terms of, you know, our relationship with China? We're increasingly facing east now for development and everything, but you know, what message should Kenya be giving to China regarding this this trade?
Well, you know, Yvonne, when we say that the Chinese or the Asians are perpetuating the poaching, I think that they're doing it without even understanding. Right, you go into a supermarket or a nice shop and it's got all these lovely glittery things and you buy them because they're on sale. I mean, if you walked into Nakumatt and bought something and said, and somebody told you that's something that has resulted in the killing of elephants, you'd say, come on, it's Nakumatt, you know? Can't be true. That's what the Chinese believe. They also have a false belief that elephants walk around and their tusks fall out. And then somebody comes along. They don't know
how that comes about?
No, they claim not to know. They believe that somebody walks around and collects all these tusks and puts them in a thing and then sends them off to China. So they claim that they don't recognize or they don't believe that this piece of ivory came from that elephant which got slaughtered.
Dead, yes.
Right? So that's one of the major problems. I think that there's a major need for our leadership to speak to the Chinese and help them to understand the problem. There are only about 50 factories handling ivory in China. If you look at the economy of China, it's really not that big for them. And as a nation, they are the only country in the world that is a major market for ivory that actually could make the difference. So when we say China is responsible, we're not saying they're to blame and they're bad people, because ignorance is, you know,
indeed,
it is a defense in some cases. What we're saying is the Chinese leadership could do something phenomenal for elephants, in support of elephants. Yvonne, if you dared threaten an elephant in China, do you know what the penalty is? It's life imprisonment. If you dared threaten a panda bear, which is now almost extinct, if you dared threaten a panda bear in China, it's execution.
So this is in their own country?
Yes, they are very, very protective of what they have left. And they need to see that that's what we need to have. We need to feel the same way in this country. And they have criticized us for our weak prosecutions, our poor court sentences, and our bad legislation, which we deserve, frankly. We deserve that criticism. But China could do much more. China is benefiting from all the resources that they're getting from Africa. The one thing that China could do to give back to Africa is to say, you know what, we don't want to be part of the slaughter and the decimation, the extinction of an animal like the African elephant. So we're going to ban the trade in ivory. That's what we're asking them to do.
All right, just one last one. In a minute, what happens if this situation goes unchecked and unabated? We have 30,000 elephants in the country. What will happen if we just, you know, sit back and say, well, you know, that's for Paula, Kahumbu and all the others who are interested in this, and we don't engage in this fight?
You know, Yvonne, the thought of it getting to that point is just too horrible to imagine. It takes a huge amount of courage to stand up and actually demand our government to take the steps it needs to take, whether domestically or internationally, to say what needs to be said and do what needs to be done. If we lose our elephants because poachers have a free run, can you imagine what would happen next? They've finished our elephants, they will finish the rhinos, they will finish our lions. They will be after us. They'll be after whatever else they can get. These are criminals. These are not people who just have it in for elephants, right? They want money. They're going to go for whatever way they can get that money. If we allow these criminal cartels to entrench themselves in Kenya, they will be doing all other manner of illegal activities. They will threaten the very stability of this country. We know that much of the money is also going into funding terrorism activities, whether it's Al-Shabaab or Joseph Kony or the militias in Central Africa. So by treating this as just a wildlife problem, we fail to recognize that actually the insecurity that comes with it threatens every single Kenyan, every single African for that matter.
Okay. Indeed, thank you very much for your time. Thank you for the initiative. We can get in touch with you on Twitter, can we? Paula Kahumbu.
At Paula Kahumbu.
Yes.
And at Hands Off Our Elephants. At Hands Off.
At Hands Off Our Elephants. All right, okay. That is one of the quickest ways you can do that. Paula Kahumbu, who joined us and was talking about the Hands Off Our Elephants campaign and just painting that picture into reality for just how much we stand to lose. 1 in 4 people working in the tourism industry could lose their jobs. And you know what that means? This is Africa. When you have one person working, they support tens of others. So these are several other people who stand to lose if we continue to let our elephants go. And like she said, it's not just the elephants, so what'll be next? One day, it could be you and I. For me, I think the biggest reason is whatever religion you believe in, I do think we were put in on this planet. We have dominion over them, and they are our responsibility. They bring us 120 billion shillings a year, but we do have a responsibility to take care of those that are defenseless in our society and in our environment. Right, so please do get in touch with her at Paula Kahumbu at Hands Off Our Elephants, and do contribute in one way or another. You can. You don't have to be an environmental conservationist. You don't have to be Dr. Richard Leakey, but I'm sure you have an idea that would contribute to this fight, okay? Right, so thank you for watching. I want to leave you with my quote of the day today. We had been discussing democracy earlier, and I think this one applies, you know, through all parts of life, quite generally. Here it goes. You know, in any democracy, majority will have their way, but minority should also have their say. So the idea is that we're all inclusive. Even if the majority wins, which is the nature of any democracy, the minority must always have a say in matters surrounding them. Thank you for watching. As always, on the show, we help to make sure that you can do something, and you can do something about our elephants. At Paula Kahumbu at Hands Off Our Elephants. Please do think of something, anything. You never know. Don't be shy. It might just be something that'll save our elephants, save our livelihoods, save our families, save our environment. Think about that. Have a very great day. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you again tomorrow. Bye-bye.